All right, buckle up, because we're heading straight into the chilling mystery of the Dyatlov Pass incident. You with me?
Oh, absolutely. A case that's captivated imaginations for decades.
9 experienced hikers vanished in the Ural Mountains back in '59, and the mystery just seems to get colder with time.
What gets me is the complete lack of any definitive answers. It's a puzzle with missing pieces, and the ones we do have, well, they just don't quite fit.
It's like trying to put together a puzzle in a blizzard with half the pieces gone. But hey, that's the thrill of it, right? We've got official reports, talk of natural causes, and then, well, then we've got the theories that venture into the truly unexplained.
And those are the ones that grab our attention, don't they? That line between a reasonable explanation and a full-blown conspiracy can get really blurry, especially with cases like this.
Exactly. So before we get lost in a blizzard of speculation, let's set the scene. Picture it. 1959, the Cold War is in full swing, and our group of hikers, led by Igor Dyatlov, set out to conquer the Ural Mountains.
And these weren't your average weekend hikers either. Dyatlov and his team were experienced, well-equipped. They knew the challenges of these winter expeditions. They were aiming for Mount Otorten, a peak that even seasoned climbers would find challenging.
So we're talking a group that knew what they were doing, prepared for the harsh conditions, and yet things went very wrong.
Terribly wrong doesn't even begin to describe it. Imagine you're on this expedition, you set up camp, and suddenly, for some unknown reason, you and your companions are cutting your way out of your tent from the inside.
Okay, that has to be one of the creepiest details of this whole thing. Why would anyone cut themselves out of a tent in sub-zero temperatures? It defies logic. Unless they were terrified of something even worse inside.
And that's where this mystery takes a dark turn. They didn't just abandon their shelter. They ran into that freezing darkness, leaving behind almost all their belongings. Shoes, warm clothing, even their food.
Hold on. They went into the freezing night practically barefoot. That's insane. What could have been so terrifying that they risk hypothermia and exposure to escape?
That's the question that haunts us, isn't it? And the answer, or at least the pieces we have to try and find an answer with, are scattered across that mountainside where they were found.
And it's those bodies, the state they were found in, that really throws fuel on those conspiracy theories.
Right, absolutely. The bodies were found all over the place, some miles from the tent. And the injuries, these weren't your typical hiking injuries. We're talking broken bones, internal injuries, even strange skin discoloration.
Wait, discoloration? Like they changed color?
Some reports mention odd orange and purple hues on some of the bodies, not something you'd typically see from exposure or a fall.
Definitely not. Okay, so we've got a group of experienced hikers who, for some unknown reason, panic and run from their tent, leaving behind essential gear. And then they turn up dead, scattered across the mountain, with injuries that just don't add up.
That's a recipe for speculation, for sure.
Absolutely. And it's led to a ton of theories over the years, some more believable than others, of course. And that's why we're here, right? To try and sift through all the evidence, the theories, and maybe, just maybe, get a little closer to understanding what really happened on that night at Dyatlov Pass.
And that usually means starting with the simplest explanations. Could it have been a natural disaster, an avalanche maybe, that caused the hikers to run?
Seems logical, right? An avalanche hits, the roar of snow and ice, panic sets in, they run for their lives.
Sounds plausible at first, but when you look closer at the evidence, a few things don't quite match up. First, there wasn't much avalanche debris at the campsite, and the tent wasn't damaged in a way that would suggest a direct hit.
So if it wasn't an avalanche, what else could have caused that kind of panic?
There's the infrasound theory. Familiar with that one?
Infrasound. It rings a bell, but I can't say I know exactly what it is.
Put simply, it's sound that's too low for us to hear, but even though we can't hear it, it can have some strange effects on us.
Really? Like what?
Well, some research suggests that exposure to certain frequencies of infrasound can make people feel uneasy, anxious, even panicked. It can also cause physical symptoms like nausea, headaches, even disorientation.
So are we saying some sort of natural infrasound wave, maybe caused by wind or something geological, just swept through and freaked the hikers out?
That's the theory. And it's not completely out of the question. That terrain, those weather conditions, it's possible.
But could it explain those injuries and why they were found spread out over such a wide area?
That's where the infrasound theory starts to weaken. It might explain the panic, but it doesn't really explain the severity of the injuries. Some of them point to a major force or impact, something more than just disorientation or a panicked fall.
So infrasound might explain why they ran, but not necessarily the fight. What about something a little more electrifying? Ball lightning. That's supposed to be pretty powerful and rare, right?
Ball lightning is a real phenomenon, although it's poorly understood and incredibly difficult to study. We're talking about these luminous spheres of plasma that can appear during thunderstorms, and they behave in unpredictable ways.
I've seen videos of ball lightning online. They're like these glowing orbs that just float around and sometimes even explode. creepy stuff.
They are, and there are reports of ball lightning causing damage, even injuries. It's not impossible that the hikers encountered a ball lightning event that scared them and might even have caused some of the burns they found on the victims.
Wait, burns? I don't remember hearing about that.
Some reports mention burns on the skin, especially on their hands and feet, just another detail that adds to the mystery.
So maybe ball lightning could explain the burns, but what about the broken bones and internal injuries? Can ball lightning really cause that kind of damage?
That's the thing. Ball lightning can be powerful, but the reports we have don't suggest it could cause the blunt force trauma that some of the hikers experienced.
So back to square one, it seems. We've got theories that explain bits and pieces, but nothing that seems to fit the whole picture.
And that is where things start to get really interesting, because now we're moving into territory where the plausible gives way to the more speculative side of the Dyatlov Pass incident.
You mean the conspiracy theories?
Exactly, the theories that take root in the shadows of unanswered questions and the unexplainable.
And believe me, when it comes to Dyatlov Pass, there are plenty of those. So we've looked at the natural explanations, but those don't seem to tell the whole story. Ready to dive into those conspiracy theories, the ones that whisper about cover-ups and things that go bump in the night?
I think it's important to remember that these theories pop up when we don't have clear answers, or when the official story just doesn't satisfy us, and the Dyatlov Pass incident definitely fits that bill.
Totally. It's like our brains are wired to look for patterns and connections. So when we're faced with something we don't understand, we try to fill in the blanks, even if it means going down the rabbit hole of speculation.
Our imagination is a powerful thing, especially when you mix it with mystery and a bit of fear. It's no wonder Dyatlov Pass has become a breeding ground for some pretty captivating theories, even if they're a little out there.
So let's get into it. What are some of the most popular ones? I know there's the whole military involvement angle.
Yeah, that one comes up a lot. Remember, this was the Cold War, a time of secrets and suspicion. The Ural Mountains were known to have military bases, and the idea that maybe the hikers stumbled onto something they shouldn't have, that's a pretty compelling narrative.
Like a secret weapon test or some kind of experimental tech that went wrong.
Exactly. People speculate about everything from prototype missiles to radioactive materials. And the fact that the Soviets kept their initial investigation under wraps just adds to the mystery. It creates this idea of a cover-up, intentional or not, which just fuels the conspiracy fire.
Yeah, I could see how that would breed suspicion. A remote location, a secretive investigation, then you throw in the unexplained injuries and those strange phenomena. It's a conspiracy theorist dream come true.
It is, and then you've got reports of strange lights in the sky around the same time. Other hikers, even some military personnel, claim to have seen unusual lights or objects near Dyatlov Pass.
Wait, there were actual reports of strange lights. That's not just an internet rumor.
There are reports, although what they were is still debated. Some say it could have been weather phenomena or even military flares. But for those who believe in the military theory, those lights become proof of something more secretive. Something may be connected to the hikers' deaths.
It's like another layer to the mystery. You're trying to figure out what happened to these hikers, and then you add in the possibility of secret military actions and these unexplained lights in the sky. It's a recipe for some pretty wild speculation.
And that often leads to the big one, aliens. When we can't explain something, the idea of aliens can be a tempting explanation for some.
Yeah, aliens seem to be the go-to for a lot of unsolved mysteries. But is there anything about the Dyatlov Pass incident that specifically makes people think aliens might be involved?
Well, you've got the strange injuries, the remote location, the lack of witnesses. It all fits into that narrative of something otherworldly happening.
And we can't forget those unexplained lights. If you're already leaning towards the alien theory, those lights quickly become UFOs.
Exactly. And the human mind is really good at finding patterns and making connections, even if those connections are based on very little information or just speculation.
It's like we're hardwired to find explanations, even if they come from science fiction. But okay, let's say for a minute that aliens aren't involved. What are some of the other, let's say, more grounded theories?
Well, there's the cryptid theory, the idea that maybe the hikers came across a creature unknown to science, something lurking in the vast wilderness of the Ural Mountains.
Like a Yeti? Or the Russian version of Bigfoot?
Right. The Yeti is a popular suspect for this theory, but it could be any large, unidentified creature that's managed to stay hidden. The remote location, the lack of witnesses, and some of those injuries, especially the broken bones and the blunt force trauma, it all fits the idea of an animal attack, just one from a creature that shouldn't exist.
It plays on that primal fear of the unknown, right? The idea that there are things out there we haven't discovered or fully understand. And a place like the Ural Mountains, with its huge unexplored areas and its own folklore, it's easy to imagine something lurking out there.
It is, and that's the power of these theories, isn't it? They tap into our fascination with things we can't explain, the possibility that there are things that defy logic and challenge our understanding of the world.
But even with all these theories, we're still left with that question, What actually happened? What evidence do we have to go on? Is there anything concrete to point us in the right direction? Or are you just going to be wandering around in the wilderness of speculation forever?
Well, that's where we need to put on our detective hats and sort out the facts from the fiction. The evidence is out there, but it's like looking at a broken mirror. It reflects a truth, but it's fragmented.
So we've crossed those snowy plains of natural disasters and climbed those treacherous peaks of conspiracy theories. But what about the actual clues, the physical evidence left on that mountain? Can those frozen whispers give us any real answers about what happened to those hikers?
Well, that's where it gets tricky. It's like we're piecing together a puzzle, but some of the pieces have faded with time, others are just gone. And the one we do have, well, they can be interpreted in different ways.
Right, okay. Let's start with the tent. That's got to be a key part of this, right? It was cut open from the inside, which makes you think they escaped in a hurry, like they were panicked.
Exactly. And the position of the tent is interesting too. It was on a slope, not exactly the most sheltered spot, so some people think maybe they were trying to get away from something coming down the mountain, an avalanche, a threat, who knows.
But wouldn't an avalanche have left some kind of mark? Wouldn't the tent have been buried or at least damaged?
You would think, right? But there wasn't much avalanche debris at the campsite. And the tent, well, it was cut open, but it wasn't crushed or buried in a way that would say direct hit from a big avalanche.
Okay, so that kind of throws a wrench in the avalanche theory. What about the things they had with them? They left a lot of their gear, but what about the stuff they did take? Could that give us any clues?
It might, but again, those clues are like fragmented and open to interpretation. Some of the hikers were found with hardly any clothes on, which would fit with that idea of a sudden panicked escape, but some were dressed more warmly, so that complicates things.
So maybe some just grabbed what they could in the chaos and others didn't have time? Or maybe they just dressed differently, depending on what they were doing. It just seems like more questions than answers.
It does, and then there's all the stuff they found scattered around. Cameras, journals, personal belongings. They give us a peek into their lives, who they were, but they don't really tell us what happened in the end.
Right? But what about the bodies? Those have to hold the most important clues, right? The injuries, the cause of death, those are facts, right?
You'd think so, but even the forensic evidence isn't that straightforward. Some injuries were consistent with falls or just being exposed to the elements, which would point to a natural explanation. But others, they're just strange, hard to explain.
You're talking about those broken bones, the internal injuries, that strange discoloration.
Right. Those are the things that have kept people speculating all these years. For example, one hiker had a depressed skull fracture, but no injuries to the scalp. That's not something you'd normally see from just falling.
So what could cause that kind of injury?
That's the question that's baffled everyone for decades. Some have said maybe it was a blow from something, but they never found anything like that. Others have even suggested a rare thing called paradoxical undressing, where people with hyperthermia start taking their clothes off because they think they're overheating.
Wow, that's kind of scary. It makes you think about how disoriented and desperate they must have been.
It does, and it shows how hard it is to put together a clear story from the evidence we have. We've got these pieces, these clues, but they don't always fit together neatly.
And then there's the whole radiation thing. I know they found traces of it on some of the hikers' clothes, which has led to some pretty wild theories about secret nuclear tests, even radioactive weapons.
The radiation findings are definitely another twist, but the levels they found were really low, and there could be a lot of explanations for that, even natural sources of radiation in the environment.
So not necessarily something sinister then.
Not necessarily. Could be a red herring, could be a piece of the puzzle we just don't know how to fit in yet.
So after all this, the evidence, the theories, all the speculation, are we any closer to knowing what happened on Dyatlov Pass?
That's the big question, right? And honestly, I think the answer, at least for now, is maybe. We do have more information now than ever before, thanks to researchers, investigators, people who've kept this story alive. But the truth, well, it's kind of like those hikers themselves, still hidden in those mountains.
So what's the takeaway for everyone listening? What should we be thinking about as we try to make sense of this?
I think Dyatlov Pass is a powerful reminder about how much we don't know. It shows us that even with all the information we have, with all our technology and science, some mysteries just stay mysteries.
Yeah, it's like a reminder that the world is a complicated place, full of surprises. And sometimes the best we can do is explore those possibilities, weigh the evidence, and come to our own conclusions, even if those conclusions are just temporary or might change with new information.
Maybe that's the real draw of these enduring mysteries. The Dyatlov Pass incident, it makes us think critically, question what we think we know, and face the unknown. Not with fear, but with a sense of wonder, with a desire to understand.
It turns us all into detectives, doesn't it? Sifting through the clues, considering the theories, and ultimately deciding what we believe happened that night on Kholat Sakal.
That's the beauty of a mystery that endures, I think. It keeps our imaginations going, challenges what we thought we knew, and reminds us that searching for the truth, well, it's a journey, not a destination.
Well said. And on that note, we'll leave you with one last thought to ponder. What's your theory? What do you think happened to the Dyatlov Pass hikers? And what does that theory tell you about how you approach the unknown? Thanks for joining us on this chilling journey into the heart of an unsolved mystery. Until next time, keep that curiosity burning bright.